Hi there, I'm Kim Ernest, and you're here with How to Be Happy Hour as we unpacked all things gaming related and its impact on mental health.
Hi, I'm Ian Graft, and I am a collegiate Overwatch coach at Lebanon Valley College, and I'm going into my 5th season coaching the team.
That's awesome.
Hello, I'm Eric Schwambach. I'm an office administrator at PCS. I am also a level 1 certified Magic the Gathering judge, and I have more hours than I can count playing many different video games.
My favorite nerd referee.
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Maggie Jiba. I'm a licensed professional counselor, currently working with PCS in the Gettysburg area. I love video games. I've been playing a lot of fighting games, but my partner and I both love a good co-op, and we hit up a lot of gaming conventions together, and it's a real passion.
Hi, I'm Josh Armstrong. I'm the director of Servants Oasis, and I've been DMing the same group for going on 8 years and love video games and all manner of board games as well.
So we're here today to talk about just generally what do video games mean for our culture, how do they relate to wellness, and why do they get such a bad rap?
All good questions.
All good questions.
Well, I will say, with Dungeons and Dragons in particular, I didn't have any exposure growing up at all and didn't have any friends that played at all. And my first game I played, I traveled like 2.5 hours with a friend, and there was like 12 people at the table. And I got one turn every 40 minutes or so, and just had a horrible experience. And several of the people in that group also happened to be incredibly stereotypical, like what you would think bad stereotype of Dungeons and Dragons player would be. And so just had a bad experience with that, but definitely turned around when I got to play with a smaller group of people that I already knew. And from then on, it's been basically my favorite hobby. So I know Dungeons and Dragons has historically had a lot of bad reputations of varying degrees of the types of people that play, the content of the game, and just hasn't been my experience in the last 7 years at all. It's been a lot of really normal, well-rounded.
I wasn't allowed to play
People.
Dungeons and Dragons growing up. I remember my babysitter's son was a Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master, and I would like sneak into their basement so that I could play. But my parents were like totally not into it. And I went home and I was like, can I like get some stuff so I can get better at this game? No, like that, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It was that and the Care Bears were on like the forbidden list. And the
Care Bears?
The Care Bears.
Oh my word.
That my parents thought they were satanic, I think. I don't know. But I wasn't allowed to watch the Care Bears or play Dungeons and Dragons growing up.
You don't hear about those two going hand in hand.
No, not often. But I'm here to marry those two truths.
I think some of the messaging too. I mean, so if we're conflating, we've got tabletop gaming, Dungeons and Dragons, which has a pretty storied history, unfortunately, like a lot of controversy, obviously, and misunderstanding. And I think that can kind of make that leap to video games as well for similar reasons. I remember I was not allowed video games even at friends' houses. We did not have a gaming console growing up, and this is so funny because actually my parents met playing D&D. That's how my parents met each other. They were big
You
Dungeons
didn't
and
stand a chance.
Right, they were big Dungeons and Dragons nerds, and they enjoyed the tabletop aspect. But I have this very distinct memory of the like I think 1997 or 1996 ice storm in upstate New York, which was where I grew up, and we were at my godparents' house because they had power and we did not. And my godmother's son had like a Nintendo 64 and like the like first like 3D Mario game. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, Mom, can I play? And she was like, no. I was like, it's right here and we are stuck here without power. Why not? No, it's not educational. And that was like the rule for everything. It's not educational. And so I didn't really get to pick up gaming until college, at which point I got into fighting games and just like fell over head over heels with like not just the games themselves, but the fighting game community and the creative outlets there too as well. Because not everybody who plays fighting games is good at fighting games. So there's got to be something for the other folks too. So, but yeah, I think the whole kind of, it's not educational, and then the content of the games, of course, too. So yeah, it's we can kind of see that leap from like D&D and tabletop gaming to video games carrying this kind of negative connotation.
Yeah.
And I bring a little bit of a kind of younger aspect because I am only 27. So I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, and I remember my first video game. One of my first video games was we had like a gateway computer, and we
With
had
dial-up?
No, not that.
No,
No,
not
no
that young.
dial-up.
Dang. Did I just date myself? I
Yeah.
think I did.
We
Go
can cut
on.
that. We can cut that.
Go, no, put that out, please, Phil.
But I remember we had Hercules, the computer game, and it was based off the Disney movie. And I was not adept enough yet. I didn't have the motor skills yet to both control the mouse and the keyboard. So my mom would control the keyboard, and I would control the mouse, and I would just spam attack. And my mom would do like the moving. So I wasn't doing much, but I think that's also something to take into account is that, and being an elementary school teacher as well, I see kids all the time talk about video games. And that's one thing that we've seen is kind of a change in the video game culture to almost like I was under 5 for sure whenever I was playing that 5, maybe elementary school, very young elementary school age. But that idea that now it's kind of like you have kids on tablets playing video games very young, and that's just a pure like shift in the perception of video games from parents.
I think also the options of video games, like
Yes.
so much. I mean, they've been working on video games like they're the cure for cancer. I mean, I remember, so my first video game experience, cousin's basement. I also wasn't allowed to have gaming consoles.
Right.
But my cousin had gaming consoles. And it's funny, that informed my entire process with video games ever more, is that I've never been a player of games, but I'm a watcher. I can sit and my husband's a big gamer. I will sit and watch him game, and he's not a big we've had kids, so like, spoiler alert, you have kids and all your gaming time goes out the window. Just buckle up for that. But he was a big gamer once upon a time, and I would sit there and I just read my book and watch him play like Halo for 12 hours straight. But I remember like Paperboy, Total Knockout, the original like Super Nintendo, and just sitting and watching my cousins play these games for hours, but I never had the dexterity to do it, and I guess I still don't because I'm just still a watcher of video games. Oh, but gaming has changed so much. Like it used to be those were your options, or like more violent video games, but my kids will play Minecraft for hours, and like sure there's fighting involved, but I don't know, I don't think it's gonna turn them into any sort of marginal violent children they're not going to go kill zombies and like sheep like they do in Minecraft.
And like my thing with Minecraft is I love Minecraft for just overall like creativity, because we use Minecraft at our school district that I teach at. I've used it to teach like area and perimeter. It's like it's like Legos to kids now.
Yes.
It is a more accessible Legos, because Legos are expensive. And
Very expensive.
you can either pay like $100 for like a 1,000-piece Lego set, or you can pay like the $20 and get countless hours out of a game where you can just have sandbox.
I feel like with my kiddos too, they have found a social community through it, even
Yes.
very young. Like my oldest will participate once a week on OutSchool, which is like a platform where you can teach kids remotely. Maybe you're familiar with it as an educator, but he logs in once a week. He's with the same group of kids, and they get little quests or missions or whatever to do on Minecraft. And this guy is named Mr. Squid. So he's a grown man that my son games with every week, named Mr. Squid. And like, what could go wrong with that? But he loves it, and he's developed like online friends of the same age, like from all over the place, Toronto and California, and just developed such like a little group of core buddies, all on the internet, which I
Yeah.
think even 10 years ago we might have done a side eye to, but we've created ways for kids to really access and do it pretty safely.
You know, my first time playing games was my dad owned, I think it was the Sega Genesis, and I mean nowadays he hates how much me and my brother play video games, but he had it. We started playing when we were young. Like Sonic the Hedgehog was like the most memorable one I can remember from back then, and then like he went out and bought us the Nintendo 64, and we played all the Zeldas and the old Super Smash Brothers game. And it's just kind of interesting because like he got me into gaming mainly because he just let us play when we were young, and now he just kind of hates how big it's become, and he always used to yell at us for playing too much. But then also like going back to the communication with other people, like I have friends on Facebook that I've met through gaming. And now I was an adult, so at this point, pretty easy. You know, my daddy's yelled at me before saying you can't tell them too much. They're on the internet. Like, I don't think some random Call of Duty player is going to come and find me in the middle of Pennsylvania.
Not
Probably
yet,
not going to happen. Yeah,
anyway.
not yet. I mean, back then the lobbies were pretty intense, but like I even got invited all the way out. I think it was like North or South Dakota for a Friendsgiving with these people I play Rainbow Six Siege with.
That's cool.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, that's real cool.
I just definitely can't make that, but very long travel, but
That's awesome. I've never made a friend online from video games, but throughout my life, the strongest connections I've ever made, other than my spouse, have always been around some sort of game. So, whether that be sports in the very beginning, and then later on Xbox, and then PC gaming in college. Like my main friend group was all League of Legends, and we would just go and we'd all stay in the same house, and there'd be 5 or 8 of us on all playing at the same time, and we'd get together to watch the championships on television, stream it, and just had so many wonderful memories. And like really outside of that, I'm still friends with at least 3 of the guys I played with back then. And outside of that, I don't know, we probably would never have been close because we didn't. That was the thing that we did together. So it's really great.
I had a friend group a little like that. These are actually friends I had in high school, but I remember when I got into fighting games in college, I had a couple of very good friends, and they knew that like my parents had this like no games rule, and I'd never gotten to like really pick it up and try it. I suppose that's not totally correct. I did own a copy of Dance Dance Revolution on the PS2 because that was, I mean, I will say I'm not good at fighting games, but I am not bad at rhythm games. But that was
Guitar Hero.
that was physical activity. That one
Yeah.
was allowed because it was physical activity. But I was like, hey mom, could I get another game for the PS2? One that uses the control? No. So I can remember my friend group, my good friend, his mom was a dentist, and he took the keys to her office with permission after the clinic was closed, and there was like this huge like television in the lobby and these big squishy chairs, and he was like, all right Maggie, time to play Street Fighter. You're gonna actually like break it in and stop watching. And so we like sat around this dentist office playing Street Fighter, and I'm like, I'm still best friends with this guy.
That's awesome.
So I mean, yeah, it's there's people that you know, because gaming is a shared interest, like those are connections that then get sustained. It doesn't have to be in something you just do on your own as a hobby. It can be, but there's so much community around gaming.
That's it's interesting. That's one of in preparation for today's pod, that was one of the things that came up as the benefits, the social benefits, specifically multiplayer online games and collaborative gaming. So whether it be tabletop or otherwise, promote social interaction, a sense of community, which overall can be really beneficial to mental health, especially for those who may be more inclined to have difficulty in face-to-face interactions otherwise. And so I think that specifically it's shown benefits for those on the autism spectrum, those who may otherwise struggle with more socially either less interested in social interactions, more introverted, or may otherwise struggle with social interactions. And I know myself, like I'm pretty introverted. I would never agree to a novel social interaction that didn't have some sort of like overarching task. Like to me, if you give me a task, then I can meet with all kinds of strangers. But if you like put me in a room at a cocktail party and they're like, get to make some friends. No thanks. I don't know how to do, like I'll go up and like, you want to talk about chickens? I don't know. Like I don't have any like friend making game. And so it's specifically a benefit among a number of other benefits like stress reduction, ways to maintain balance and just unplug your brain, take a break. But specifically when it comes to social skills and social engagement, it's seen as a pretty significant benefit.
I see it as almost like a really, really, really laid back icebreaker. Like you ever go to like one of those trainings and one of the first things is,
Gosh,
all
like
right,
every PCS
find the
training,
find the
start with
person
some
that
sort of
find the
icebreaker.
person that went on vacation this summer, and then like everyone groans as they get up and they walk to somebody. But like it's a very laid back and casual icebreaker with somebody. anecdotally, whenever I was in college, freshman year, everyone just like is awkward and not knowing. Freshman dorms are awkward, you don't, and you're in like your freshman orientation group, and I found out one of my now like best friend, he was the best man in my wedding. He lived on the same floor as me, and I found out that he and I shared an interest in FIFA. This was before I had gotten my own like big boy PC, so my main source of entertainment was like Xbox, playing FIFA. And I remember within like 2 days of going to college, him and I were in my dorm room playing FIFA just over and over and over. And after one person wins, you do press the random button 5 times, and you play again with different players, and it's just that constant like, and that's a connection that I still have today. Him and I still play. Like, he lives all the way out in Maryland now, and him and I still play together like almost nightly.
I don't know that my husband would have social interactions if it weren't for his gaming. Like, and it's not that he doesn't see them in real life, but grad school, my husband's from Texas, we moved up here. All of our friends in graduate school all went their own way. Like, that's the downside of graduate schools. You get to meet a lot of really cool ass people. That's the upside. The downside is then they all go back to their own corner of the world, and you get to keep up with a bunch of distance relationships. And Mike kills it by just logging in and playing some sort of game with the collective, and they keep up and they talk about their kids, and they do and like that is his a genuine source of social connection that keep these relationships going across pretty big distances.
Yeah. If not for my...
You just moved here, right?
Yeah,
Not that long
January.
ago. Yeah.
So, and from Florida. It's not a short trip. So every other week, we get on Zoom, and my D&D buddies and I get on Zoom and play together, and it is so nice because not only do we have a blast playing Dungeons & Dragons, we love it, but also I have an automatic in every other week to keep up with 5 or 6 of the people that were and are my closest friends. And the friends that are home back in Florida that I don't do that with, I talk to maybe every other month now. I mean, if I'm really being intentional about it, maybe a little bit more often, but that is a huge source of like connection for me and my friends back home.
And that's one thing I also see develop with my players that I've coached. It's the same idea of my...
Tell us a little bit about that. Give us a quick of what do you do as a coach? What does that mean?
Yeah, so as an esport coach, think about your favorite college sport. A lot of people think like, oh, football. You think, oh, Penn State football. It's along those same lines of we are watching film, we're having practice blocks multiple times a week, depending on our opponent, depending on... There's scouting that I do week in, week out, trying to like talk to other coaches of other teams to get film from teams that they've played. Because one of the hard things about esports is not every team has a Twitch channel or a streaming platform or a YouTube channel where they upload their VODs. So sometimes it's talking to other coaches to be like, hey, you played this team in week 3. Do you happen to have the replay code of that game that I can you have to like sweet talk and be very, very like ask very nicely, and oftentimes they'll give it to you, but sometimes, I mean, it's up to them. And we're watching film, and we are having our practice blocks that all lead up to our matches. And unlike the NCAA, there is no NCAA for esports yet. But there are so many like fringe leagues for esports, and we're a part of NACE, which is National Association of Collegiate Esports, and then there is a smaller group that is just the MAC, which is the conference that LVC is part of. So like Albright, Alvernia, Arcadia, and the MAC does a big tournament, a LAN out in King of Prussia every year, and reigning champions 2 years in a row. What's up?
All right.
And NACE is a remote league where we do just online matches. And they split you up into conferences, divisions, depending on your size and your skill levels, which is great because for a while there was no skill levels. So you could have a team of new players playing against a team of like ex-pros. Those are rough games. And and it's a total balance of like focusing on the game but also focusing on your players, because at the end of the day these are still college kids, and we have to make sure their grades are on point. We have to make sure that their mental health is on point. And I also played for LVC's program in their inaugural season back in 2018. So that was a really cool opportunity to be a part of. And it's being a player and then transitioning to a coach, it was a very cool opportunity. And yeah, I know I've long-winded that, but
No, that's really. When Susan said, "Well, I have an esports coach," I was like, "Well, I don't know what that is, but that sounds
Yeah.
excellent for this particular topic." Do y'all ever get together outside of the online world? Like, are there in-person components?
yeah,
as
we
well?
have all of our players are on campus.
Okay.
Some schools they have remote players, depending on their like model of their school. But we are lucky enough to have all our players on campus, and we have an arena on campus where we have PCs that like line all the walls in the middle, and that's where every team kind of practices and plays their matches. And whenever we practice, the players have the choice of either going down to the room to play, or a lot of them are lucky enough to have PCs in their dorms, so they can choose to play from their dorm as well. But for matches, normally we'll all go down and we'll play, and that's the kind of in-person side of it, where it's like, and then outside they're kind of like they're a team, kind of like the football team eats together. There's like, they have like lunches together. They kind of, a lot of them are digicom majors, digital communication majors at school,
classes
or
together.
computer science majors. So they all have like classes together, and it kind of like gives them a network and a community of their own that they never had before.
That's
No,
cool.
I don't recall esports from my college days, but I graduated in 2006.
Overwatch, right? Is the game you coach?
Yeah.
Do you have a main?
Back in Overwatch 1, I played tank mostly.
Okay.
But since Overwatch 2, I now play mostly support. So
Interesting.
I enjoy playing Ana a lot.
Okay.
Ana, and if someone else picks Ana, I play depending on the meta that's really in. Like right now, big meta is Brig Ana, so I'll play Brig if I have to, and then also Zenyatta's fun.
So you have counter picks.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's depending on like what a fighting game tournament you're either like watching or participating in. Some of them have rules against counter picking, and some are like totally cool with it. Like, you're playing vanilla Sagat. Not gonna go up against a vanilla Sagat with my mace. So the counter picking depends
Yeah.
on like what your tournament rules
That's
are.
part of like the coaching aspect of it though.
Yeah.
Like the scouting. Like you see,
Right.
okay, this team, they only play this type of team composition.
Right.
And you want to kind of have your team, one, play their strengths, but two, you want to kind of counterpick. Like, they're playing this hero. Well, I know this hero counters it, so we're going to practice all week playing this hero, this composition to counter that hero. Yeah, it's big. It's like, that's part of the scouting fun. That's like kind of chess-like. Then you have to hope that they don't watch any of your film and adjust their game plan.
It's because it's blind pick, right? In Overwatch, you don't get to see what they're picking as they pick.
Yeah,
do
you do not get to see what they're picking.
Yeah, cool.
So it's often that's where the
mental
scouting.
chess going
Yeah,
on
that's
there,
where the
for sure.
scouting is really important, and yeah, that's the hard part of not every team having a Twitch channel. So
Right.
teams need to get Twitch channels. That's all I'm saying.
That's the big take-home message.
That's
from
the
today.
big takeaway.
Get your own Twitch channel.
Yeah.
My son would probably try to take you up on it. Be like, buddy, nobody wants
Hey.
to watch you play Minecraft right now. We're not there yet.
We're always recruiting.
Yeah.
Future esporters. Yeah, man, because the picking aspect for League of Legends when you watch the competitive was always one of the most exciting parts because you could predict how an entire game is going to go, and you'd be in the third game of the World Championships between the two best teams in the world, and like they'll have a character get picked that you've never seen played in competitive
my
play
gosh.
in
Yeah.
like 2 years or something. And you're just like, what are they doing? And then they just, come out and it either fails spectacularly or they do something
They kill it.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a cool part of it.
Do I have any other Street Fighter fans at the table, or am I solo in this?
I played some Street Fighter 4.
Okay, Street Fighter 4. Okay,
Yep.
so 1 year at EVO. Oh my gosh, I don't remember what year this was, but they do allow counterpicking at EVO, but you can't counterpick like mid-match or something. That's right, you have to play your set. And Infiltration, and now Infiltration, little disclaimer there, he actually had a suspension from esports due to some, I believe it was like domestic violence. So I don't want to be on record supporting this guy in any way, shape, or form. But there's a character in Street Fighter 4, so you know Hakan, the big red oily guy. So Hakan is a character that nobody picks. This guy was almost like practically a joke character because you have to keep throwing oil on yourself, and you have this mechanic. He's a Turkish oil wrestler. Let's talk about stereotypes in Street Fighter. But anyway, nobody took playing Hakan seriously because you have to constantly throw stuff on yourself, and that's a whole like extra mechanic and extra step. And I remember talking with some people on a fighting games forum and making some joke like, nobody plays Hakan, this is silly. And somebody says, no man, Infiltration plays Hakan. And it was like, Infiltration does not play Hakan. This is stupid. So anyway, I'm watching EVO with my friend, same friend who like took me to his mom's office to play Street Fighter. And so we're watching, and Infiltration is like, I don't remember the character he was facing, but I remember this, and like he was getting his butt kicked. He really was. And so he goes and counterpicks and pulls up Hakan. And my friend is like, is he throwing the match? Is he throwing the match? He did not just pick Hakan. And I was like, dude, no, Infiltration plays Hakan. I read this on a forum, and it was beautiful to watch. All of a sudden, this character nobody plays at EVO. Nobody else played this character. He just shot through and reset his bracket. And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's
right?
cool.
So, yeah, and we're sitting there just like losing our minds. And I was like, I know this. He
Because
plays
he
Hakan.
Developed a skill set in using a player that
That
nobody knows
nobody-
how to play
very
against.
Nobody else
It's
had
a
a
niche
strategy
pick.
against.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, this really, and you see this sometimes in fighting games because you'll have a new character drop. So like for example, at EVO this year, I'm imagining we're probably going to see in the Street Fighter scene a lot of Rashid play because he just dropped like 2 weeks ago. Not even that. So nobody's going to have strategy against him yet. But those players just picking him up, they've got to be really busting out to try to get him tournament ready, right? So it's again this idea of character selection. If you've got some shadow counter pick, be it for Overwatch, be it for another fighting game where nobody has strategy against this character because nobody plays this character, that gives you a huge advantage if you can counter pick to that, right? So again, if you can watch, because then everybody was like, okay, Infiltration plays Hakan.
Yeah, so then everyone knew
suddenly
how to-
everybody has to have a Hakan strategy now. So
we call those cheese comps, where it's like it is just like a very niche random
Yes.
comp that like you pull out just so randomly, like. But then if you see another, like, we were at this one tournament and we saw this one team that they pulled out this one comp, they did this one strat, and it was just like such a cheese comp. But it's like one of those things that if you can like, if you just need to get the littlest bit of progress on like a point, because like Overwatch is objective based. So one of the game types, you have to capture a point. Think of it like you have to capture a point, which you capture by getting everyone on the enemy team off the point.
Okay.
So you have to capture a point, and then you have to push a payload through the entire map, and it's called hybrid. And if you hold a team and they don't capture that first point, you only have to get one tick, one third of the way, one third of progress on that first point. So you can pull out a cheese comp at that time. And we saw this team pull out this one cheese comp, and we were watching. We weren't playing at the time. We were watching. We had like some downtime, so we were just watching on the big screen, and we saw them play it, and we're like, "That's wild." So then next practice,
Right.
we're like, we should try this just to see what it gets us, and it works. That's the thing. Especially, and then like you'll see other teams that have played other teams like that, and they'll start using that. They might use that random cheese strategy, but that's part of the like mental
The
like,
creativity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like,
and
the way one person is going to push that payload is going to be different than the way another team does, right? And so when you have obviously like the advantage in esports as opposed to say online play, everybody's just jumping in together, but you can strategize around that, and there's so much creativity in how you play. And be that again, my thing's fighting games, but that's true for Overwatch too. I've seen people do wild mechanics with Tracer that I don't even watch a ton of Overwatch, but I'm like, wow, this person plays very differently than that other person. So again, you can have so much creativity in not only how you play, but then that allows you to have a lot of strategy for those cheese comps that then you can then
Yeah.
adapt, use yourself, right? And then that just spreads through the community.
And you can see you can see in so many other games like League, you might have like a random specialist that's like really good at one hero that
One
no
thing.
one knows how to play against.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might have like, or in like CS:GO, you might start, you're like pathing, you might practice pathing a certain way that like not a lot of people know, and pathing is whenever you like go through the map, and it's how you travel through the map. So pathing, you might try pathing through this way, which no one ever is used to. So it's purely like a surprise thing.
It just feels like, so there's a concept in family therapy called unbalancing. And it's whenever you are, and I love doing couples and family therapy. It's one of my favorite treatment modalities. A lot of people stay away from it because as the therapist, it's a lot of work on the therapist to figure out like, where are we going? What's this? What's that? Like there's a lot of strategy in family therapy. I think that's why I like it. I don't know. But the whole purpose is just to unbalance the system and throw out something that literally no one knows, or someone doesn't see it coming, so you can almost get past their defense mechanisms and past whatever guard they're going to throw up, simply to break down the process that's going on. Like if I'm working with a couple that they have a conflict that's starting to take off, and you see like this person maybe stonewalls while this person continues to like tap, 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 stonewall, 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 tap, tap, tap. So you just throw something out there to change that process or pattern, just to unbalance the system and see what happens next. And it doesn't all like, oftentimes the system will organize around whatever pattern of relating they used anyway. But if you can unbalance them, even for a moment, sometimes you can trick people into behaving a different way. And that's what this is evoking for me.
And that like idea invokes the idea of tilt, which tilt in the like, it's not just in gaming, it's a term that's
Isn't it an error message?
it's
And like
from
old,
it's derived from poker.
pinball? Okay, I thought it was
Which
pinball machines.
getting you're tilted is whenever you get it comes from poker. It's the idea of like you get so frustrated that your frustration begins to affect your decision making. And if you've ever played a game that's very frustrating, or you get tilted, or like just overall getting frustrated, you could say you get tilted. It affects your decision making. And working with college kids, tilt is a real thing. Like, and that goes back to the mental health side of it, where you need to, for me as a coach, be able to bring it back and almost like reset.
Yeah.
And you saying that, going at it, I think you said from a different like angle, looking at it from a way that nobody else sees it. Sometimes that's what like you have to do during the match. I remember one thing that happened. This was pretty fresh after COVID. Like we were playing together again, but it was very like, it wasn't as like we were still spaced out in PCs. We were fortunate enough that our arena's big enough where we could have like our players still together, so they had to sit one PC
Every
apart,
other.
and they still had to wear like masks and things. We were very lucky in that sense to be able to play through all that. But we were playing Arcadia in the MAC finals, and we were the upper bracket. We made it to the finals. Arcadia made it from the bottom bracket. So if they win the first series, it's a bracket reset, which means they get a chance to play again to win the whole thing.
Yep, that's how it is in fighting game tournaments.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah, the bracket reset.
And they forced a bracket reset. And this was something that we did not see coming, because we were watching the previous day's matches, and we were like,
We got this.
yeah, we were like, okay, we beat the strongest team.
Yeah.
Like on paper, the strongest team. We were like, okay, we're good. We go in, we do our business, we get out. They beat us in the first match. That was tough, even for me. Like as a coach, it's like, this is rough. So one of the things about Overwatch that is tough is as a coach, you're not allowed to talk to your players during a match.
Oh.
That's like league rules. You have
So
to
all of your coaching has to happen before and after
before
the match.
before, during the flip and sides. Think of it
Okay.
like offense, defense,
Okay.
switching. You can coach then and you can coach after. But during the actual play, you cannot like say do this, switch to
Right.
this. That's up to the players to do. And I remember we needed a change of momentum to win this match. And one of our players called to go this one cheese comp on this one map to kind of switch up what we were doing. And it worked. And we pushed it the whole way. We rolled them on that map. And in reverse, we took our tilt and we got momentum. And they began to get tilted. And then they kind of hit a wall. And we were able to build off that and continue kind of rolling through and finishing out winning the whole thing in a 5 map. Crazy match. But that idea of switching things up whenever like your
It's
team
not working.
exactly, because like Insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and over with no change in result.
No, you're giving me a lot of great therapeutic metaphors. I think, I think the tilt. I mean, man, how often is that? I mean, one of my favorite things to do as a clinician is to watch therapy tape with my clinicians, with my supervisees, and I don't know. I love therapy. I don't know. I love therapy, so I'm a nerd and I enjoy it and. Watching tape, but you can see in a clinician's eyes when they are on tilt. You see that you watch the process. You see the client start to maybe become dysregulated on their own, and then you see the clinician enter into some state of dysregulation. And it makes me think of years ago. I got to go with one of my college. My grad school supervisors, he worked for the Dallas Cowboys as a sports psychologist. So he was full time at the VA, and then he would get called in to work with the rookies at the Dallas Cowboys and teach them things like how to set boundaries with people, how to. Now that you have all this money, like, what do you do when people crawl out of the woodwork and ask you for it? Like distress tolerance, conflict resolution, like some soft skills that a lot of these folks enter into the league not necessarily having all those bits and pieces. But a big part of his work was working with people, as he called it, who got the yips. And it was just this idea of you're too in your head and you can't function or operate moving forward. And it's just so curious to see it play out in like a gaming culture as well.
Oh, absolutely. I have seen actually, I follow a lot of gamers online, be it streaming or be it just, generally social media. A lot of fighting game presence and people that I enjoy watching. And I've seen some of them start to talk about that in addition to like having an esports coach or being on a team, they work with a therapist to work on nerves or work on like, wow, when I get up on stage, my play suffers because the lights are really bright and my heart starts racing and then my hands get sweaty and then I'm not hitting that analog stick, right? So obviously, right, there's a need for it too, because if we're talking truly esports, which I mean is one aspect of gaming, one particular subset, obviously playing in a tournament is very different than the social aspect of playing D&D at home. Very different settings, so therefore very different needs. But I am starting to see some players openly talk about working with a therapist to do those basics of distress tolerance and anxiety management of like, and how do I not get in my head when the person across from me just pulled a cheese comp and whipped out Hakan and I don't know what to do against an oiled Hakan help.
So for your esports, are those kids like getting anything out of it other than just playing a game for fun? Are they like getting, like I know at most colleges they'll get, I'm trying to think what is the word?
Scholarship?
They'll get like
Scholarship,
scholarships,
financial
financial aid,
Yeah.
like they get to pick their classes first, like things like that for like normal sports. Are they getting that for esports too, to an extent?
LBC is this is my pitch, ready? LBC is very lucky with our esports program because we have really nice scholarship opportunities for our players, one of the better ones in the state. Because
File that away for
yeah.
10 years from now when my oldest will be applying for college.
We do have scholarship opportunities along with financial aid that you can kind of like pile on top of one another, which is very unique for Pennsylvania. So we don't have the idea of like the Alabama bring them in for the full ride type thing isn't the same, but we still have financial aid and chances for players to get pretty much an incentive to come play for us. Yeah.
Man, if somebody had told me 10 years ago you could get a scholarship to play video games in college, I mean, that is just so
It's
freaking
wild.
cool.
It's wild. And it's happened so fast if you think about it. Like,
Yeah.
just think like 10, 15 years ago, you had like PlayStation 2. Like, the idea, like, LANs were just people bringing their gaming system or PC to a room together, literally a LAN, playing on a LAN connection.
Yep.
Yeah, StarCraft, man. Ages ago, I don't know anybody played the original StarCraft, but that was the best ever. It was like you just get a bunch of people with their laptops or whatever in the same room. Now you can actually play with people. So
And now,
was
in
awesome.
like, now we're able to give kids like scholarships along the same line and give them a chance to kind of be like a student athlete. For
That's
some,
really cool.
it's crazy.
That's really cool. Well, you just imagine, like, it opens up opportunities to a completely different subsection of the population. Like, I don't know, I can just imagine that many of us are not born to be college athletes, or we just don't maybe have I don't have the hand-eye coordination to ever get there. I'm sure there are certain innate skill set, like there's certain innate skills that complement gameplay or support you as being like an esports player. But it really does seem to be like that great equalizer in some sense. Like anybody, regardless of their background or, you know, how tall they are. My husband, he's 5'8", and he always says, well, you know, if I was taller, I would have definitely made it in the NBA. It's like, yeah, you would have, baby. You're a shooter. You got this. But, like, there's just certain ways in which you can't, like, just how you're made. It seems like this gives you an opportunity to really grow in a skill set or grow in an area through just, like, sheer stick-to-itiveness and fortitude and have some opportunities.
Yep.
There are still barriers in place in the esports world still.
Like what?
Just things like not having access to a PC.
Right,
Oh,
right.
like
Technology access.
Yeah.
So technology, so our more rural communities that don't have high-speed
Right,
internet
right.
or
Now,
a lower
I will
socioeconomic.
I will say this: the library industry is like on the down. Like not as many kids, young people are going to libraries,
Oh,
right?
but I love the library.
But one thing that people are trying to do with libraries is turn them into STEM centers. Have books, have still the availability of books and all those things, but also create a space for young people to come in and kind of like create like a PC lab. Or you see it in King of Prussia. They have a PC. They have like an entire PC like arena, esports area where you can pay like I don't know how much, but you can pay money and you can pretty much rent a PC for the day. So there are still barriers in place, but we're seeing.
The Whitaker Center has something like that.
Yeah, the York Martin Library does too, and in York they have, theirs is a little more like a bit of a makerspace setup. They recently ran a program for adolescents on like cosplay, which is kind of also a thing
cute.
that I do a lot of, but they had like 3D printing, but they also have then like a mix lab, I think, for kids who want to do music. They have gaming days there, absolutely, to get kids in to like try video games. It's part of, I think they have a grant funding to get more adolescents in the library, and they have things like video game days. Even a client I'm working with has the library they work at, which I won't disclose, has like a teen gaming program that they help run to get more kids and adolescents into the libraries. I mean, absolutely, I do think it's very important that not every family has the privilege to go afford a nice PC system. I mean, not every laptop can run games the way you
True,
need it
yes.
to.
Especially
right?
not if you want to be competitive.
Exactly,
that's another
right. Or
level.
in the,
I mean,
the
when it
fighting
gets-
game community, you need like you can learn to play on your little controller, but most people who want to legitimately play have to invest in a fight stick, and that's an extra piece of equipment that you need too.
You gotta have the right kind of TV with the super low
For
lag
real.
rate and all that.
There's an
Yeah.
electronic investment
Yep.
that not everybody can realistically afford. Like
True.
dropping the money on like a PS5 or something. A lot of families don't have that.
Here's my plug. Dungeons and Dragons is incredibly cheap to play. And if you need dice, I have dice for everyone. So,
Don't let the
Yeah.
financial investment deter you.
No.
Josh will give you some
I will
dice.
give you the dice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's a very good point too. I mean, we're spending a lot of time focusing on the electronic sports, that esports in nature, right? Video gaming, but tabletop does afford a lot more accessibility, so much more. That again, there's not as much investment. There's not a coaching aspect. It's a much more socialized form of gaming where it's about just the. I mean, I'll let you. I'll let you take that away.
I really love that it's not competitive.
Yeah.
And I am very competitive by nature, and so for me, competitive games can be not fun because I want to win. And if I'm playing with somebody who's not as good as me or isn't as into the competitive nature, then it becomes sort of one-sided, which can lead to hard feelings. Definitely never experienced this in my life before. I'm totally just theorizing. No, and even like the dungeon master or the game master is not trying to kill the players. They're trying to build a world and tell a story together, which is so refreshing to me compared to because I played League of Legends for way too many hours, and it turned into, I started super early, like alpha testing or beta testing, and it's so competitive and it got so toxic. Like the reason I quit playing is because the players who played are so mean to each other that that was enough. I was done with the game.
That's why my husband and I quit playing Settlers of Catan.
Really?
Because we called it Settlers of Divorce. Because, give me your wheat! Like, it got really ugly there for a bit. And so I think the last time we played was like the last time we played.
We only played Settlers of Catan one time in my family.
Did it get...
My dad and sister were cheating and trading outside of their turns, and I was very upset about it, and we've never played again.
Never played since, right?
Yeah. But just to sit with a group of friends and have a means of playing intelligent pretend with one another, and it's a great time and super cheap.
It feels to me like Dungeons and Dragons was the original escape room, like the activity that you come together with a group of people and it's your goal to solve a collaborative problem and work together. And it's curious to me that we don't have more of those types of things. Like, so often our gaming is built around competition or me versus you. And one of the things, in preparation for today, ended up reading about brushing up on Jungian archetypes, which is curious because these different archetypes play out, actually based on our conversation.
Yeah.
You had talked about that, and Christine Zahorchek did her entire her dissertation on the Jungian archetypes throughout Harry Potter, which I've never wanted to read a dissertation before or since, but I want to read that one because it's very interesting to me. But that these different Jungian archetypes show up throughout all of these different gaming options, like the hero, the shadow self, the trickster, the lover, the mentor. And they play out in all these different, but we have so few. Demio, the game that I was talking to y'all before we turned on the mic, has that collaborative gameplay, and you're working with a team to get through, and it's so much fun. But there's not many games out there. It's a lot of competition, a lot of versus.
Yeah.
There are some two-player co-ops out there. My partner and I play a lot of games. I mean, she's actually the bigger gamer than me. Before we met, my deal was I play fighting games, and that's it. And she really opened up, hey, games can be something that doesn't have to constantly be a 2v2. Co-op can be just the two of us hanging on the couch together doing something, working towards an objective. There are some great co-op just beat 'em up scrollers where you and your buddy walk down the street, and I'm like, great, it's like a fighting game where you walk down the street and take on the boss together. Or even something like Mario Party, as simple as that is. Sure, there's the competitive aspect of it, but you can also have team-based play where you and your partner are either playing against the other team of two people or against the PC, and you can say, okay, well, you go over there and get that item, and I'll go over there and get that ally. Or the Mario Party, not the one that just came out, but the one before it. We were actually joking about this last night. We were playing it together. There's a route where you go rafting, and you
I
have
love that game.
yeah.
Such a fun game mode.
Right, but so you have to raft, and you have to communicate. You have to use communication skills. You can't just do this and go down. It'll run into the rock, and then you'll miss the balloon. That is going to give you the mini game that you have to do as a team. And I get a little over enthusiastic, and we'll be like. And she's like, no, stop, slow down, and no, go this way. And like we were kind of chatting, like it takes a lot of communication to actually play this game well. We have to talk to each other because we're both working towards like the same thing. Like she's kind of joking, like I could see people getting really mad at each other over this. But yeah, you have to work as a team in order to accomplish it. So I mean, co-op does offer some stuff for that. There are co-op options in video games, but I do feel like tabletop's kind of always been the very classic co-op.
Very classic.
Yeah.
But especially recently too, both in board games, the board game explosion, and also in video games, that people want more and more co-op stuff.
Yeah.
I think, and I've seen so much more in the last probably just year and a half, 2 years, than I had. Like just in that time period, it's like quintupled or exponentially grown. And like for instance, Cadence of Hyrule. Have you ever heard of Cadence of Hyrule?
Is it?
It's a
something about
rhythm-based Zelda dungeon
Yes,
crawl that's
yes.
cooperative.
Whoa! I know this
My
sounds.
wife and I
exciting.
play it all the time. It is so much fun.
Rhythm game, yes.
Yeah, and it's just a gem. It's an indie like studio that Nintendo let use the Zelda IP. It's only the second time they've ever done that, and the last time it was a disaster. So I don't remember the name of that game, but it did not do well. And so they actually let them use the Zelda IP, and it's a fantastic cooperative game.
Really?
Yep, and board games too. Like have gotten so. They've expanded so much. Like there's a really beautiful game called Wingspan.
Oh yes. Oh.
Is that when you play?
No, my friends at Magic played a lot. It's birds.
It's birds, and there is a winner and a loser, but you never have to hurt your opponent. You just build a little habitat with pretty birds, and it has little facts on the bottom of the card about them. The art is beautiful. You get to roll dice in a dice tower that comes as part of the board game. It's just a great game that isn't like cutthroat or stressful. And
I don't want to ruin it for you, but you know there is a Wingspan competitive scene.
I'm not surprised because it's on Switch.
Yeah.
I know the digital game is very. There's an online mode that I've never played, but that doesn't surprise me. But yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty just to
I
look
wonder-
at. Yeah, we keep saying we're gonna pick it up, and then we always end up getting another game at the game store for whatever.
I actually very very few games would I say are better digitally than than on a physical format. This is one of the very few because the Switch version has like even the bird calls. So when you play a bird, it plays that actual bird's bird call.
Oh, that sounds so
And
nice.
it's really easy. There's no setup. You can just turn it on and play with up to 4 or 5 players, I think, on the Switch. It's a really great, probably my second favorite Switch game.
So you're telling me I can learn playing video games?
Who'd have thunk, right?
I know. My dad
Your
telling me-
parents should have,
I
yeah.
think Minecraft taught my son to read.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. Like, he wanted fractions, math. I mean, he wants to be good at Minecraft, and to do those things, you need to learn how to read. And so he very quick, like, he went from, like, flashcards to, and I mean, he is an incredible reader today, and I truly believe it was because he found the one thing that really and he loves books and he loves reading, but he likes to let his eyes rest and me do the reading to him, which I don't mind. I'll milk that for as long as I can. But he became extremely motivated to read because of Minecraft, and learning like fractions and all of those things simply because he wanted to build things and create and communicate with his buddies so that they're working at the same goal. I think a lot of benefits can come.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things my dad always complained about was, it's just going to rot your brain.
Yeah, it's
Like-
not education. You're not learning anything. Come over here and play Carmen Sandiego with me. And I was like, okay. I mean, I learned nothing. I just liked all the characters, but I did not learn
I also
geography
really
from that
liked Carmen
game.
Sandiego.
I mean, okay, so I suppose, we had like very educational computer games, not video games. And I guess for some reason, because PC gaming is like kind of now its own thing, but like back then it wasn't. We had like all the I don't know,
I know what you're
educational.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to learn something from this. The only
Yeah.
reason we were doing this is so you learn something. And I was like, I like the little guidebook with the pictures of the characters. I don't know where Egypt is.
Did you ever have to do it in the I know as a kid my parents used to get like the summer programs that were in video game form. It was basically like a summer like enhancement thing that you could do and it was like in a PC. It was like
Oh,
in
no,
PC
no.
disc form, and you like put it in, and it's like it's very clearly like what's 2 plus 2, and then if you answer right, you get to move your little guy, and it's like that's like a main way that like you can teach though now. The idea of gamification is
Right.
like a
I was
big
wondering if we were
thing in
going to
the
talk about
classroom.
gamification.
And I love gamification. And I've been lucky enough to meet lots of teachers who also like gamify their entire classroom. Like they're from the start of the day to the end of the day, they have a gaming system. They have a system in place, a game going all day, where they give their kids. No, I don't go. This was a super cool teacher that I met at a conference. She's awesome. She inspired me to do like an entire gamification to learn multiplication facts for my students, and she has like an entire setup where you start the day, and if you do as you like do positive things throughout the day, this was I think 4th grade, you get tokens. And
Token economy.
yeah, you and sometimes there you can get perks for your character in yourself throughout the year, and these perks then go into like some other form of like it's like a year-long quest while learning.
School's just an RPG now.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and like
That's cool.
she designed this whole thing herself, and I'm like that's awesome. And yeah, that idea of gamification is even being used like in classrooms.
That
My-
doesn't. Oh, go ahead.
No, you finish your thought.
I was
No.
going to say this doesn't sound at all like any kind of like child interventions that we use at all to like reinforce positive behaviors with tokens and earning things. I've never heard of such a thing.
My son's kindergarten teacher actually gamified his classroom with little token economy, obviously. And one of the things she said is she started doing it because coming back to school after the pandemic, she said and my son's kindergarten teacher had taught for like 35 years. Like she had been a kindergarten teacher forever. She was like the OG teacher in their school. And what she said is that behaviors have just been markedly different from her experience prior to COVID, and then everyone being out and kiddos not going to preschool and not having any of those steps before kindergarten. I don't know if your experience has been comparable. But she said as a result, she started the token economy, and then would give every kiddo on their very first day of school, they got to pick like a little creature of some kind. And then they had their creature home, which is like a little plastic tub and a little like eraser animal. I think my son had a monkey. And then you could earn tokens to buy things for your monkey. So it was or whatever your creature was. And it was essentially like this little Tamagotchi habitat
Neopets.
through the whole school year that you got to build and create this little world. And I was like, man, that's got to be expensive for you. Like your kindergarten, like how do you do that? She's like, I go to thrift shops and like all the little like Brickheads where they bring in all the little like gamey pieces from old Lego sets that nobody uses anymore and just cleans up at yard sales and everything else. She's like, oh, this whole year cost me like $11. It was excellent. But all just to keep kids engaged and interested, and it's all gamified.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing about that idea. I think that's desk pets. So,
Yes.
yeah, the one thing about desk pets is that if you do it right, it's amazing. But if you do it with a negative reinforcement, it can get. It's not as like.
Oh, there was like a black market for desk pet. Right? Like they would like my son would take in like Pokemon cards that he had doubles of to
Oh my
like
gosh.
trade for the like
Pokemon cards.
and it was like what are you in the black market of desk pet? But you
Look,
know.
I love Pokemon, but Pokemon cards are the bane of my existence
Yeah.
in elementary school.
I would agree.
Also not educational. Also, I wanted them very badly.
I mean, I love Pokemon.
Oh
It's
my
like
gosh,
my
me too.
favorite game. But
Yes.
but yeah, like
Sure, as a teacher, it's tough.
it's tough. It's tough when a kid brings in like a nice thing is, I'm gonna rant about this for 5 seconds. they have these really nice cards that are worth like money, and they bring them in without a sleeve or anything.
I know.
And I'm like, buddy, that's like a $20 card you're holding, and you just have that out like in your backpack in your pocket.
Put it in your pocket.
And now it's
I'm
like wet and crinkled up, and I'm like, dude, that's like a holla. That's
Yeah,
like a nice full art. You need to like sleeve that.
I had a client do the same thing. They were like, look what I got for my birthday. And I was like, that should be protected. Wow, it's really cool. You want to show that to me. And, like, if it's special, you should take care of it. No, don't do that. Don't put it in your backpack. What are you doing? No. But it's like this, like, rainbow embossed, like, and I'm like, no.
Spoken like true collectors.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We're talking all this time about educational games, and yet our research on video games, there's several studies that suggest that certain genres of games actually have positive effects on cognitive skills overall. Specifically, action games and strategy games have been shown to have improved cognitive skills, such as improved attention, visuospatial abilities, and problem-solving skills. And I think so often, especially like from my generation, I very much relate to what your parents were saying. Like, if it's not educational, you don't get to play it. And there was this huge emphasis on only focusing on like ABC Mouse or like the equivalent of that once upon a time. But the research really suggests that when consumed in moderation, when consumed with parental involvement and connection from parents, they can improve cognitive skills regardless of the lack of educational value.
So prior to our to this, we had been talking about like what topics and things do we want to bring up, and I had mentioned there is a charity organization called Child's Play that provides gaming consoles to children who are in long-term care in hospitals. And so they oftentimes will work with the child life specialist. And there's so many ways that they can be used as an intervention, right? If you're in the hospital for weeks on end, you're going to be bored. You're probably in pain, or you're probably anxious, right? So I mean, not only just having something else for the kid to do, but with the child life specialist and also with the providers, potentially using them as an intervention, be it for occupational therapy or physical therapy, or even like anxiety management. So if you actually go to their website, they're called Child's Play. They're a nonprofit. You go to their website, they actually have a master list of games and how they are used. So you can click like ADHD. Here's a whole list of games that help improve sustained focus, mindfulness. Anxiety. Here's a whole list of games that have distress tolerance aspects. Cognitive impairment, even, they have a whole section there around working on like retention and knowledge building and stuff like that. So they actually, like, all those factors and categories that you're listing where kids need to learn, kids need to develop, or even adults. They have everything like broken down on their website about like how this game can be used as an intervention, specific games, specific like IPs and stuff like that. It's really excellent, just the work they do, and then also like how they do it.
They're a really cool organization. I remember years ago being out in Washington, which I think is where they began.
Yes,
I'm
I think
pretty
so.
sure. And just hearing about all the different things this was probably 12 years ago now, so they were just kind of getting their feet under them. But they have gone on to do some really neat things countrywide now at this point in time. And they're connected to Penny Arcade and PAX, correct?
I'm not sure. I couldn't speak
I'll have
to
to fact
that,
check
no.
myself on that. In my mind, they are, but maybe I'm.
They
somewhere
were
wrong.
at MagFest this most recent year, and MagFest put a lot of their a lot of donations towards Child Play. Like, there basically, you had a whole bunch of opportunities to donate them throughout the con. It was pretty
really
cool.
cool.
Like, we went to, because MagFest also has a big like music scene, so you could like go live request a video game song to be played for like X donation, and that went to Child's Play. So yeah, I can't say too much about what their other presence is, but I encountered them at MagFest first, which is in the DC area. So but yeah, like fantastic, and the idea of like gaming as therapy and therapy as gaming, like it's kind of like when I think about art therapy, there's two camps very much oftentimes, because I do a lot of expressive arts work. So you have art as therapy, where just the act of coloring, just the act of doing it, that's going to be relaxing, that's going to be beneficial. And then there's therapy as art, which is the meaning making, which is the, okay, what's going on? What is the story here? What does this mean? What does this represent? So we have these kind of two factions. You can get that in gaming too.
So I want to move into our question and answer portion of of today, and then we'll sort of land on last call. But I added a question as we were talking. Weirdest game throughout your history that's left an impact on you?
Like the strangest game you've encountered.
Well, maybe not the strangest game necessarily, but the game that has impacted you that feels the most obscure or out there, off the wall, left an impression in any way, shape, or form.
Strange, obscure.
Impossible Creatures. It was the first PC game I ever found, and I got it at maybe like a Circuit City or something. And yeah, rest in peace. And it was terrible graphics. The story was okay, but basically the whole point of the game was you had these, like, it was an RTS, real-time strategy, so you had to harvest ingredients, and then you could use those to combine animals that your little character had, like, sniped with his gene-gathering gun. And there was like a campaign, and you had to beat the bad guy, but it was I went back and tried to play it because you can get anything on Steam nowadays, and so it's on Steam, and it's not fun now. But when I was like a middle schooler or whatever it was then, it was like
All about it.
yeah, it really changed my view on like video games, because prior to that I just had a couple of like N64 games that I had ever played. It was like before I didn't ever have a console other than my Nintendo 64 until I was older. But yeah, it left a very large impression on me, and it was really strange. But I also loved you build a hyena with the head of a archer fish. Those the little fish that shoot water, and so you got a little hyena running around shooting water droplets at your enemies, and it was just crazy.
I'm trying to think from my own history. What about y'all?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a lot of games that have like had an impact on me positively, but I'm trying to think of like strange off the wall things that would not be like an immediately recognizable title, and I'm like,
Oh, has anybody here played Undertale?
Oh yeah.
oh,
That game was impactful.
whew,
Yeah.
ooh.
Having
Yeah,
a
but
lot of
everybody
reactions.
knows
I don't know
Undertale. Like, I
don't
wouldn't
know
call Undertale obscure. It's huge. They played the Undertale soundtrack at like a symphony orchestra
True.
in Japan.
It's huge in gaming circles.
Sure, but
most
probably-
of my people that I've told about it, even if they dabble in video games, have never heard of it.
Never
though.
heard of Undertale.
Yeah,
I've never heard of it.
Ooh,
I would recommend.
mercy.
Yeah, don't Google it first.
Do not Google
Don't
it.
Google it.
Yeah.
Do
Okay.
not. If you
Yeah,
have not, it is best to go into
Go
it
in with
blind.
no understanding.
That's
No
whatsoever.
understanding.
That's usually
yes.
my approach to everything.
Me too.
Yes.
I like
Why figure
clean
it out?
slate.
Yeah, Undertale should be played with a clean slate if possible. And at this point, I don't think anybody who is like in the gaming world can play it with a clean slate. But like, oh my goodness, if you could play it blind, do so.
I'm gonna check it out.
How about Doki Doki Literature Club?
Oh,
All reactions over here.
I mean, if it's from Japan, I've probably heard of it. I'm
Okay.
probably adjacent to it. Yeah, I've got clients into that one for sure. I had a client like take a poem from Doki Doki Literature Club and like change the words and submit it to their own like English class, and I was like, that sounds like some light plagiarism, but okay.
Slight though.
Just a little
At least
bit.
they didn't use Chat GDP or something.
Yeah,
GPT?
exactly,
Yeah, it could be
exactly.
worse.
Yeah. No,
Mike always makes fun of me because I can never get the letters right.
yeah, I'm trying to think. There's certainly some.
GPT, is that it?
Yeah,
you got it.
I
You
got
got
it.
it.
I know it.
But yeah, that's another one. Go in with a clean slate, and
Alright.
you will be. Well, I'm not gonna say anymore, but
Nope.
if you get a chance to play that one, it's
My first video
interesting.
game was on the computer that I was allowed to have, and it was the Christy Yamaguchi ice skating challenge.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know that has impacted me positively in any way, but it was one of the few games that I was allowed to personally own.
Okay.
Otherwise, I had to be an observer from afar. So I was actually really good at the Christy Yamaguchi
Ice skating game.
ice skating game.
If we ever get a team, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know. Draft me. I've always wanted another degree, so let me come back.
One of
I'm
the
an
more
MBA.
one of the more weird, obscure games I ever played. It came with like this kit that my parents bought for the GameCube, which I still think is like one of the best Nintendo consoles ever made. It sold horribly, but it's probably the best thing they ever did, other than the Switch. And it was Super Monkey Ball. And I absolutely
Yeah.
hated that game. Like I got this for my birthday, and like there was other games too. But I was like, I'll give this a try, and I was like, I don't understand what the fun is being this cute little monkey and this little plastic ball rolling around on these weird geometric shapes trying to collect bananas or something. Like I gave up
good
real
summary.
quick, and I said, this is just stupid. So that was more the obscure. Like I don't know why that was ever created, but apparently it sold because they had multiple games.
Yeah. Never
I'm
had a
gonna-
GameCube, but
I'm gonna answer on the impression thing, like a
Okay.
huge impression.
Left an impression.
And mine would probably be it was one of the first like story games I played where it was like more like narrative driven, and it's To the Moon. Have you ever? First video game, one of the only video games to this day that have actually like made me cry. Amazing game. You can get it on Steam. It's pretty cheap, but it's like narrative driven, and it was one of those first games I ever played that actually had like a strong story. Because up to that point, I was playing like mostly like sports games, Call of Duty, things like that, or like Pokemon, things like that. So like the idea of like a narrative driven story was like very interesting, but
Is it a visual novel or?
it's not a visual novel,
Okay.
but it has like the vibe of a visual novel.
Huh.
But it's like you play, you can move your character around, but but there's like a ton of like talking and of like
Huh.
yeah, really good game. Look at it. Don't
to the moon.
to the moon.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, also great soundtrack.
You didn't cry at the end of Modern Warfare 3?
This
Come
class.
on, like oh, it was so cathartic, the ending mission. So, for you don't,
I
guess you don't
cried
know.
watching my husband play The Last of Us in like the first
Yeah, that's
like,
also-
10
that's a
minutes.
good
Okay,
Like,
I cried
it
at the
started
beginning.
and I was like,
Yeah.
turn
Yeah.
it off. I don't like this game anymore.
Yeah, I cried at the beginning of that too. That was rough.
Yeah.
You didn't even get through a tutorial yet.
No, and I'm crying. He's like, I can't play this with you in the room.
I'll say one other game, and it wasn't even the entire game that did this. It was literally like 1 5-second portion of the game. The game is called Celeste.
Oh wait,
It's
I've
on
heard,
Switch, PC.
I've heard of it. I've heard of it. I honestly think my partner has it on Switch, but I don't think we've played it together. I can see like the icon of it in our little Switch thing, but I could not tell you what it's about.
It's a difficult game. Like it's made to be like trial and error, but there's a part. It talks about mental health, which is very interesting. I didn't know this going into the game, and there's a part with like that talks about like anxiety, and the character like, you have to do this one like mission in the game. This one part where you have to like bring this character back down from a panic attack.
Oh,
Ooh.
interesting.
And it's a crazy like metaphor for a panic attack and how you bring them back down from it. It's on sale a lot on Switch and Steam. So if you ever see it on sale screen, feel free to pick it up. It's a great game, and just for that portion, it's worth it in my opinion. And it also talks about other forms of like mental health, like depression and things. It has a lot of like symbolism with that. But yeah, that's that like 5-second scene was like very impactful for me.
I don't have a strange game that was impactful. I have plenty of games that were very, very, very impactful for me. And some of them, like I participate in like a lot of games, not just as a player, but like from a fandom and community sense. Like I am not a very good Street Fighter player for as much as I like Street Fighter, but I've been very involved in the fandom. I've been extremely involved in other ways, and I can say that was a very big impact for me. But like I can't think of like something obscure that was impact. I mean, maybe I don't know if this is obscure or not. I don't think it counts. My partner and I tried this co-op game called It Takes Two. Yeah, see, everybody knows this one. It's not all that obscure, but like you play as a couple that's going through like a marital crisis and about to get divorced, and it drops you into, and so like the little girl is like, oh, I don't want mom and dad to get divorced, and so like you somehow end up waking up as her dolls. And you have to navigate these incredibly complex tasks Oh my god, and the game is huge. Like these incredibly complex tasks that you have to do as a team. So you want a game for communication interventions? Go pick up It Takes Two. But I think like we
Tuck that away for my gaming
we
couple that I
kept-
see next week.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
we kept,
tomorrow. Wait, what's it called? It Takes Two? Okay.
It Takes Two. Yeah, so when you play, one person plays the husband, the other person plays the wife, and we like kept waiting for it to end. We were like, all right, that's got to be the final. We did that, and then it'd be like, no, here's this entirely new, very complicated dynamic that you need to now master of like rewinding time or like teleporting yourself, and it uses these new controls, and you also have to use your old controls of grappling onto each other across. And I was like, we had to be like, we're not. I think I was the one who was like, I can't finish this one. I'm
too much.
sorry, it's a little too much. Can we go back to like Scott Pilgrim walking down the street beating up people in Canada, please? I cannot do It Takes Two.
So our last question before we move into last call is, well, it's sort of a two-part question. So I'll open it up to both of you, and we do have a couple of upcoming pods. So I'll go through and run through our upcoming pod topics. We have one on stress and burnout of the helping professions. We have a pod coming up on vicarious resiliency and how, as a helper, you can like cultivate a healthy space. So not toxic positivity, but true vicarious resiliency and how to cultivate that within high needs, high risk professions. We also have another pod coming up specifically on motherhood. And I've had a couple people reach out and say, will you have a pod on fatherhood? Absolutely, and I'm happy to host it, but I can't be our primary spokesperson. So I need some volunteers for fatherhood before I get that on the docket. And then last but not least, we have one coming up about pets and whether or not pets bring us joy, suffering, or anything in between. And so you can go ahead and submit any questions you might have for that pod at kim@howtobehappyhour.com. But our final question for this particular panel today, two parts. How can we use gaming as an effective tool to address mental health or other challenges that individuals be facing? And how can we guard against the potential risks, such as the risk of gaming addiction, impact on sleep, some associations with depression and anxiety, or those who really struggle with moderation and balance when it comes to balancing gaming with a healthy lifestyle? So two parts. How do we use it? And how do we guard against the things that could go wrong?
It would have been very helpful if somebody had told me when I was leaving for college that like the chemistry behind video game addiction. My whole group of friends got super addicted to playing, and would all terrible habits that came along with it. No sleep, no, like other responsibilities being kicked to the curb. So I'm not sure, like, of many ways we could guard against it, like off the top of my head, but I would say like talking about it and like warning young people as they like get their own freedom and get to set their own time frames. Like my college experience would have been a lot better if I'd had some moderation in
I feel
video games.
That's a great, because we were talking about token economies. Most of the video games are set, like most gaming is set up where you get like little endorphin, like little hits of dopamine along the way. And many of them you're never quite done. So there's never that natural, I mean, I'm watching that even with my 7-year-old now, like he never wants to end. Like he loves it and we're never at a good enough stopping point. And so really sitting him down and being like, buddy, that's by design. Like you are the product here. And know that. And it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. It doesn't mean that it can't be a place where you make friends or develop different skill set. But you're the product here, and you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And when it feels like you just can't possibly end or you might die, that might be a good time to end.
The people designing them know what they're doing.
Yes.
They're
Yes,
they
way
do.
smarter than we are. I won't speak for everybody. They're way smarter than I am when it comes to that kind of thing. They are designing addiction for the purpose of a profit, right? Like, so.
And I think parents really have to take an active role too in enforcing those healthy boundaries. I think this is something that I am really surprised to see in my client population, where kids don't have limits on screen time, or they have really lenient limits. Like, oh yeah, like so long you're off by 8 o'clock. You know, okay, but then you could be getting up at 7 and playing all the way till 8 o'clock, right? Like, so long you're done by bedtime. Like, that's not realistic. So, I mean, parents, I think, really have to step in and teach kids self-regulation, as they do for all sorts of things, right? And gaming is part of that. And yes, there is, like, these things are designed to continually spur our engagement. I mean, I always like to say any hobby or pastime can become problematic. Anything you can get sucked into and forget to stop to eat, stop to drink. I mean, I know I'm guilty of that in my creative endeavors. I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of sewing, and I have to be like, have a little knock on the door like, hey, time to come out and have lunch, right? Thank you for that reminder. But we have to take into account that, like, as electronics, I mean, we know that phones are designed to stimulate our engagement. Games are very similar. I'm here playing No More Heroes. I'm recalling, I believe it was one of the trailers for No More Heroes 3 when it came out. They literally had the female lead on the trailer and voiceover while she was explaining how the game works. Like, and gamers, remember, you have to take a break after 8 hours of play or you will literally die. And remember to drink lots of water. And I'm like, oh, I think 8 hours is still a long time or something like that. But yeah, literally in the trailer, you had her and her little, like, accents or whatever being like, you will literally die if you take longer than that. And I'm like, okay, that's you're acknowledging the problem of gaming addiction as you advertise the game.
At least they're transparent about it.
Yeah,
they're leading with it.
Yeah,
At
they're
least
leading
they're
with
transparent about it.
I think looking at it from now, I'm a little different because I am trying to get my players to play a game, you know, like, and one thing that I see it as for our space, and we're very lucky to have a space where these players can come together and play and, like, go off and do their thing. But we, just like any other sport, we value grades first, because you can't play on our team if you hit a certain GPA. And them knowing that and almost like giving them that, like, responsibility of, look, you're very passionate about this game, you want to play for this team, you know that if you spend all night playing a different game, because you playing competitive games, like, personally, I can only play so much, and then I'm like, but if you give me, like, a casual game, like mine for a while was Stardew Valley, where, like, I would lose track of time playing that game. Like, I'd look up and be like, oh my gosh, it's 2 a.m. And that's where, like, it gets dangerous for me. But, like, we set that expectation, like, that for those freshmen first week coming in, they know I'm here to not just play a game for a team, but to also try and get an education out of this. And kind of giving them that space to do that helps them do it. And we can also kind of regulate it. We can say, like, okay, we're closing the arena at 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. We have a closing time, I forget, but we're closing the arena at this time, and we're constantly checking in. We're constantly, like, especially if we see, like, we get grade reports, like, or we get warnings from professors as well. If a player is slipping in, like, biology, we'll get a heads up from the bio professor that's like, hey, student is not doing well, you might want to reach out. And that's where like the I have to be mean coach and go in and be like, hey, what's going on? And if I notice you're playing, like, 12 hours of Destiny and doing, like, all these quests, or playing other like WoW, for example, for, like, hours, I'm gonna be like, we have to clean this up, and I have to be the parent, and that's never the fun part. But as, like, in esports, it gives us, they have, like, those figures there to kind of, like, watch out for them and, like, redirect if we see, like, something going wrong before they make a mistake of letting their grades slip.
I think I shared with y'all while we were just doing our sound check, I played World of Warcraft very briefly. And by very briefly, I think a year of my life, in which I lost the rest of my life. I remember, like, coming home from work and because I had just moved to Texas, I had no social supports, I had no friends. I was waiting to start school at the end of the summer, but for some reason I moved in like May, so I waited tables and I played WoW. And I remember like living for days off of like Hamburger Helper because I wasn't going to go to the grocery store because that took too much time. And then pretty quickly decided a hard break from WoW was good for me because I was losing time and just it wasn't. But paying attention then, like zooming out and looking at the behavioral principles, like you go on a quest. You complete the quest. Sometimes you need friends to complete the quest, so you have to like find friends, complete the quest, take it back, and yeah, you get that little endorphin hit, dopamine hit because you did the thing, and there's like the confetti or whatever. You get the points or the whatever you need. You level up, and then, but at the same time as you complete, they give you a new one, or 2 new ones, or 5 new ones. So you never arrive at that natural conclusion, and it's designed to just keep you going, keep you playing, and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. And how did I get here? And then in that same graduate school program, I researched attachment, and I would find myself at conferences surrounded by the people that research the widows of Warcraft, which is, I guess, a true cultural phenomenon in which people have lost their spouses and partners to this virtual world for days at a time, that they identify themselves as widows because their partners won't get off the video game.
And I think with anything, we can go back to that healthy balance. Like, we can think about our careers, or like, I could spend all weekend lesson planning or trying to create like this, that. So I could spend like hundreds of dollars in my classroom. And I would hope someone would go to me and be like, Ian, you have to take a break.
It's too much.
Yeah. And that's like a positive thing. Like, we, in America, we see like, oh, you've always put your career first. You're grinding. You have that grind set. And I think like there's always that healthy balance. We can even think about with something as simple as like a chocolate bar. Like if you have like a couple pieces of chocolate, that's fine. But if you start chain eating chocolate,
Well, I also do that too.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, it's this idea that any coping skill, any engagement has the potential to become unhelpful if we are not able to do it in a way that is moderate. And if it begins to impact our relationships. And I think there's kind of a twofold piece here that yes, electronic use does stimulate certain dopamine parts of our brain. And like, okay, so we have the Widows of Warcraft, but like somebody could just as soon not be in a very helpful or functional relationship with their partner because their partner is, I don't know, down at the bar every night with friends, or is
gambling. Yeah.
or is or even just has a hobby that is all consuming that they're not able to set boundaries with. Maybe they're really into car modding or something, right? And they're out in the garage till 2 a.m., modding the headlights or something. I don't know anything about car modding, right? And not actually engaging.
Are involved, right?
Yeah, not actually engaging with their partner. So I think there's the twofold piece that there are some qualities that we have to consider how they affect the brain. And I think oftentimes this goes down into that whole video games getting a bad rep when you could just as soon become a widow of any all-consuming engagement, right? So we have to look at that kind of overarching, wow, there's enough of it happening over here for us to coin this phrase, this Widows of Warcraft, but how many other people are, mourning an absent spouse for other all-engaging hobbies, consuming time, addictive things, right? So
When I'm not doing their research enough justice, because what they found is that there are, in fact, Widows of Warcraft. And they also discovered that couples that game together stay together. And that consistently,
Yeah.
if the dyad is gaming, it is a protective factor for the relationship as
Right.
long as there's some like semblance of negotiation and similar to any other healthy relationship dynamic. So yeah, absolutely. You can have the Widows of Warcraft, but what they found is it's actually a very pro-social activity for couples to engage in together. And I know you and your spouse do, or
Yeah.
often because we've been invited to your game night every once in a while,
Yeah.
where you have those activities that really just draw you together and bring you closer. So that I want to dip back to the first part of the question, which is how can we use gaming as an effective tool? Already, It Takes Two is on my list as a therapeutic intervention tomorrow for a client actually out of your clinic. So you'll see it on the treatment plan update. So that's coming your way, Eric. And how do we use it effectively? Obviously, there's bigger organizations out there like Child's Play and other organizations that are using it to address some more serious needs. But how can we, as either the lay person or a helping professional, utilize gaming effectively?
Well, I'm not a professional by any means, but I have seen firsthand in my Dungeons and Dragons group more than one occasion where an individual will come into the group because they have a connection with somebody who is already there, and they have very sub-average social life. They struggle quite a lot with coming out of their shell or being, authentic or just expressive at all. And like 3 or 4 weeks in, that starts to fall away. And 2 separate individuals in my group I've seen really come out of their shell and like actively make friends, and it's not something that comes easily to them. And so that has been a personal experience with a very positive benefit of like playing games together with people. And I think that being intentional about including people that maybe would not be your first choice, like friendship wise, might surprise you in the ability for them to like grow and adapt. And so, not that anybody who joined my table wasn't a friend or anything like that, but I can see how if you're really selective with your clique or whatever, then that would exclude that possibility. But inviting people in to play games and interact where you have something to focus on other than being a people person gives people an opportunity to grow and really express themselves better.
It's funny, that was actually one of the questions submitted for today's pod, and it didn't really fit the pod, but it was all about, can you please do a pod about how to make friends as an adult? Because that is such a common concern, such a common theme therapeutically. It's shown up in many of my sessions over the years. Adults coming in and saying, like, I work, like I get to know my kids, friends, parent, but like, how do you make real authentic relationships in adulthood? And it sounds like while this whole pod doesn't address that question fully, it in one way, this is one way to expand your social circle and develop some real true relationships in a less common modality.
Yeah.
I think relationship building is really a key piece, because if you are gaming isolated, if you are sitting up in your room all night, playing, as you were saying, World of Warcraft and not stepping out to grab some food or stepping out to have some sort of social interaction. The isolative nature is where we're going to start to see that problematic behavior. But if you're doing it in a social context, that completely changes things, because you are then developing community, you're developing social skills. There's even a level of accountability of like, wow, it's pretty late. Maybe we should like go to bed. It's a conversation my partner and I have a lot. It's bedtime, no more games. But this idea that being a collaborative experience opens up so much opportunity for relationship building, communication skills, collaborative play. I was even talking to a provider who said she plays Minecraft with her clients in session.
I've worked with kiddos on the autism spectrum. It's like, hey, let's play some Plants vs. Zombies.
Yeah.
Because then he'll talk to me.
Right.
Otherwise, it was him sitting there like this.
Yeah,
I get out Plants vs. Zombies. We're talking. We're communicating. We're
help. How do I do
collaborating?
this? I'm confused. Help. I need help with this. Can we work together on this objective? Right. Those co-op games where you can be working as a team on objectives as opposed to the competitive aspect. There's so much potential for therapeutic intervention there. Like I would love to have half the families that I work with be like, sit down and play Mario Party and practice those communication skills that I gave you. Right. So I mean, there's so much opportunity for games to be social. And I think very oftentimes where we hear about problematic patterns is when the games are not social, they're isolative. So just even having that shared aspect opens up the opportunity for so many appropriate interventions. And it's not even not even getting into the work that Child's Play does. I went to a panel on them, so I'm like just totally fangirling over them. Like I went to multiple panels at MagFest with them. But again, the occupational therapy opportunities, the physical therapy opportunities, the games for distraction, for pain management for kids, games for anxiety management, even things like simulations with VR. If you have a child who has to have blood work drawn daily and is terrified of that, let's practice that in Oculus Rift. Let's develop something so that you can gain mastery of this and have exposure work done in a way that isn't actually going to overwhelm you. There's so much. I even read, I think, an article about virtual reality being implemented in exposure work for things like CBT and phobias. I mean, there's
The
opportunity.
VA does a lot of stuff in that particular area.
There's so much opportunity out there as games continue to grow, but if all we ever hear about is the very negative stigmatizing piece of it, right? I think I'd like to see more therapists start to adapt this as a tool.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I've seen more evidence of that recently. I backed a Kickstarter called Critical Core, and it was made by, I think it was 2 doctors and then some other people who are more game-oriented, but they developed the game purposefully as a method for people on the autism spectrum to practice beneficial skills. And it's, that's kind of a little bit more specific, but there are lots of cool ways where games can be used to practice things that are meaningful that you wouldn't probably get the opportunity to practice very much in everyday life.
And again, like what you're describing too, Kim, if I sit there with a client and I'm like, so you want to practice this skill together? Like they're gonna be like, no, and put their head down, right? If I'm like, hey, tell me what games you're playing, and I show that I'm interested and engaged in also just their world. Like we didn't even delve too much into the idea of archetypes, but who's your favorite character? Why? What do you like about them? Why this character? What about this character? Who's your favorite? Who's your least favorite? What do you like about the story? The rapport building opportunities are huge because then also you're showing the child too, or the adolescent, that you're invested in what's important to them. And you're letting them tell you about the meaning of that story, of that world, of that game. There's so much emotional work that can be done there too, beyond just the skill building, which is very essential, but that becomes the gateway. That becomes that kind of backdoor into their world of what's important to them, where sure, then we can start laying down the foundations for skill building. But yeah, if you're not going to join them in that game of Plants vs. Zombies, they're not going to open up to you. We're not getting anywhere. Yeah, we're not getting anywhere. I have clients who play Genshin Impact. It's a huge game right now. Huge. And I mean, we could talk about gacha games and the problems with gacha games. You want to talk gambling. But I'll see. I think their favorite character changes every week. And I'll be like, great, tell me about it. Tell me about it. And it's a great way to meet them in that world that's important to them.
And going back to the question, you mentioned community. I think that's the biggest thing that I see on my end in my little world, is that every year we welcome in new players that are coming in. They're moving to campus from. We have some players that come from further away, but most are like Maryland, PA, further out area. But they're coming in. They probably don't know anybody, so it's really easy to just kind of like, if you put a group of adults into a room just with like nothing there except like them just sitting there and just being like, all right, let's have let's talk about something.
I feel like my palms got sweaty just
talk
talking about it.
something.
Hi, how are you? Welcome to therapy.
Yeah. I would love this. I don't know if this might be an experiment already, but to see how long it would take them to open up and talk to each other deeper than just like, it's been hot lately.
Yeah.
But if you give them like a simple game in front of them, or like a couple game options that they can play as a group, or you give them just like some Joy-Cons to play Mario Party, how fast would they open up to each other? And that's what I feel I've seen my players develop. We bring in like a freshman, and by like sooner, we create like a family to the point where like this past year we lost our biggest class. We lost 3-4 starters, and it's sad to see them go. And like it's always, and it's like that thing, but would those players have had that same type of interaction if that esports program or if that group didn't exist? that idea of community building. And you mentioned to show interest. That is like one of my biggest tips for like, I always say I haven't been teaching for that long. Like this will be my 4th year with the district I'm at now, and I always think like if I could tell a new teacher anything, I would say take interest in the silly things. I will tell you, I am not a big fan of Fortnite. I do not like the gunplay in Fortnite. I played it like a long time ago for like a week and I got tired of it. But you know, whenever that became like a phenomenon to those kids, I was asking, so what skin are you playing with? Or like, what do you think of the new season? Or now I'm lucky enough to be really into Pokemon, so if they ask me about Pokemon, or if I hear them talking about Pokemon, I'll be like, who's your favorite Pokemon?
Who's your starter?
Yeah, my favorite's Snorlax. What about yours? And
Ninetales, obviously.
Meowth.
Good choice.
Meowth. Have you not seen my Meowth lanyard
No.
that I wear to work? That's right.
That's a good. That was
Thanks.
good.
We have a lot of time to practice.
But like, I see it in school as well. If you like take interest in those kids, like especially today, we see gaming culture has totally shifted to where like I have kids coming in that like have experience playing games, and if you take interest in it, you build that rapport so fast.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, he's the cool teacher. He knows what Fortnite is.
Right, and I think it showed up for me when you were speaking, and then was sort of reinforced. I was not all that into Pokemon before my 5-year-old at the time. Now I played Pokemon Go. That's different though. Like that's a different type of fun. But before he came home and started talking about it, and I think I made the decision like I'm gonna know Pokemon. I'm gonna learn it so that I can have conversations with one of the most important people in my life. And because he's not gonna learn psychology to talk to me about my interests or chicken genetics or like any of the other weird niche shit I'm into. He's not gonna do those things because he's 5, and that would if he got into chicken genetics, it'd probably be the proudest I've ever been.
I was gonna say, what if he just sat down at dinner and he was like,
So he's actually pretty into so the nerd apple did not fall far from the nerd tree. So we can get all into like whatever. We're not going there. That's a different podcast. But that presence and that ability to show up and just be, and I work with so many folks professionally, and then I have so many friends and just like mom friends personally that video games have become a point of contention between parent and child, and I can absolutely see how it gets that way. Like setting and enforcing screen time limits are not fun. Saying at the end of the game where they have like one more thing, mom, one more thing, like finally having to be the bad guy and being like, no, the thing will wait. I'm taking it. So I get how it can fall towards the contentious, but I've also found that it's such an opportunity to connect with a little human that like we just have very like it's amazing to me how different our interests are. So yeah, and like obviously I love sports, so we can talk about like basketball and and football. I don't like baseball. He does, so we can connect over those things, but being intentional about how I realize that it's a point of tension at certain periods throughout our life. And I'm not going to paint with that broad brush and be like, I hate video games and we're not going to talk about it because I just want to fight with you. It's such an opportunity to connect. And so I think that would be my advice to any parents listening to the pod.
Yeah.
Like, whether you love video games or hate them, if your kid's into them, I think you kind of have a responsibility to try to figure it out a little bit.
Showing interest in your child's interest
Yeah.
is one of the most impactful things that you can do as a parent. I mean, obviously, as an educator, as a clinician, those are important tools to get ultimately kids to do what we need them to do, right? Like whether it's, schoolwork, participating in therapy, it's that open door of rapport building. But just as a parent, that strengthens your relationship with your child because it shows your child you value what they value. And if all you receive is, I liked Pokemon, guess what? Pokemon's not educational. Right? So again, all this negative messaging that builds up if a child is taught, everything I like or is interesting, my parents are going to knock down, right? And then you have a whole host of other problems beyond just, here's the screen time limit. It's, this thing everything I like is somehow bad or my parents don't like it. I know a lot of kids who've gotten messaging about that around games because it's not productive or it's technology. And right, I mean, it's that balance, of course, you have as a parent of setting those limits, but also taking a interest in who your child is. And if your child likes games and Pokemon, well, that's who your kid is. And even if you don't like those things, you have a responsibility to show up for your kid.
And if you're concerned, being interested and involved is a much easier way to direct their interest than just like leaving them free reign with the internet, like for the limited amount of time where you set super hard boundaries, right? Like, so I'm agreeing. I think just good advice in general.
Right, I've gotten into some fun, like we love Sneaky Sasquatch
Yeah.
in our house. Like it's it's the stupidest game, but we all got into that. We're getting this dog together. Like we're gonna work through the difference, and so like we got into playing together. And for me, it's funny because you were talking about being really competitive. I struggle because then we're playing together, but like they're not as good at it as I am, and so
And you don't want to
like,
lose.
I don't want to lose. So that sometimes like I don't save after they're done playing on my account. Don't tell them that. It's always an accident when like, where'd all your money go, Mommy? I was like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know. Mommy didn't hit this. Mommy restored from the last session. But all those different, like, it's an opportunity. And I don't know that I would have ever thought that I'd be masquerading as a Sasquatch, stealing people's picnic lunches and later going for mayor. But I don't know. It's an opportunity. It's that place to connect, and
For sure.
and you know, during a time where it just feels harder and harder to connect to your kids.
Now, can I throw out hearing the conversation, I had like a thought. My wife and I don't have children. We have a puppy, and he doesn't play video games yet. So we don't have to worry about screen
Working
time.
on that one.
Yeah, we'll see how he does. But we're introducing Angry Birds slowly. But do you think, coming from like a psychology standpoint, if a parent or adult shows interest in their kid's video game, the kid will be more responsive to screen time limits?
That's an interesting
Like
question.
if you, let's just say we'll use Pokemon as an example. You take interest in Pokemon, you maybe like will watch them play a couple battles, they go through a route, and you say, okay, tonight you can go up to this gym, and then you stop. Do you think they would respond better to that than saying like, all right, you get an hour?
I mean, I would think so, only because I operate from the assumption that, like, correction without connection is useless. And so from where I sit, that's a very easy way to tangibly demonstrate connection and then have it lead into your correction. One, I think just knowing about certain things, you know what a good stopping point is. Like,
Right.
it's been years since I played World of Warcraft, but I know you can't stop in the middle of a raid. That would be preposterous. Like, why? So I think if you even understand, like,
Right.
knowing when to interrupt your kid, like, part of successful parenting is timing and like opportunities.
Yeah.
And so if I'm choosing to say like, oh, your time ends right now, first of all, I always give a countdown. Like, I'm like, all right, buddy, 20 minutes. All right, buddy, 10 minutes, get to a good stopping point.
Right.
5 minutes, don't start anything new. But I don't know. To me, that connection piece is so essential. And when video games are an active point of division, I would suspect inherently they would respond less positively. I don't know.
I'm not
I-
sure, yeah.
I mean, I would completely agree with
agree?
you,
Okay.
Kim. Right? Because you're meeting the child where they're at,
Yeah.
while also enforcing them that there needs to be healthy boundaries. And if you know what's going on, then you can have more rationale to enforce. So you can have you're meeting the child where they're at while also making sure that you, the parent, are calling appropriate shots, right? But okay, time to turn it off. Time to turn it off is very different than like, buddy, the gym will be there tomorrow. Charmander needs a good night's sleep before he can take on Erica. And like, okay, you got here. We're in Celadon City. Awesome. Hit the Poke Center. Give everybody a good
Yeah,
night's
have, like, a
sleep. And
good
then like
stop.
you
Yeah.
need a good night's sleep too, because like, so your Pokemon get to go to the Pokemon Center and you get to go to bed, and it'll be there for you tomorrow morning. Right? That's at the very least more engaging to a child than just like, and now we stop.
And when we're not playing, we're talking about play. Like my little guy, he's very into. So
What Pokemon does Erica have? Remind me.
Yeah.
It's been a minute since we played. I know she's got a Gloom, but like, right? What's your strategy? Like, wait a minute. Whoa! You're not bringing Squirtle up against Erica. We got a problem, buddy. Right? No. Please tell me you picked Charmander as your starter. You didn't. Oh no, we got problems. We need
catch
another
a fire
fire type.
type now.
We need another fire type stat. You cannot. I know you like Squirtle, buddy, but like that is not gonna work against Erica.
So that's where I end up as a parent. And so that's the balance, right? Like
Right.
show initiative or show interest without taking it over.
Right.
And that's where we talk about balance, right?
Yes.
Because that is my story. Like I like to win, and so then it's like, just give it to me. Give it to you're not. Rocket is there, and it's my time to battle him. Like that's not helpful either.
Right,
so
right.
it's finding that balance where you're using it as a point of connection, and creating space for it outside. I mean, I have friends that are like, oh no, it's not video game, and we're not going to talk about it. And I can think about one, and it, like, whenever this kid comes to my house, though, he's like, can I play your video games? I'm going to be in the basement. I'm going to be on the Switch. And
Yeah.
Like, and he's just like, you can see this, like, hungry desperation for it. And then, of course, I'm in this balance point of, like, but I know your parents don't let you, and, like, now you're here, and, like, go outside. Go. Like, you're at, how do you make that call?
Right.
You're not mine to parent. And then my son's like, well, we're allowed an hour and a half every weekend day. And it's like, well, different families have different rules. But even then, it's a good opportunity to talk about how different families have different rules.
Right.
We don't let my son play Fortnite. He has other friends that play Fortnite, but I don't know. There's enough in there that I'm like, you're not ready for it yet.
Right.
You're still enjoying Minecraft? Play that for a little bit longer, and we'll get into Fortnite eventually. There's plenty of time for it.
Going back to the first question about learning, it doesn't always have to be like learning your division or learning like something. I don't need to know how chemicals react. I'm not in chemistry
Egypt
yet.
is on the map.
Or where Egypt is. I just got Pokemon Shield like 2 days ago at a flea market in Delaware. And like the whole story of always Pokemon is like you're training to defeat all the gyms. You have to go defeat the, what do they call it? The
Whatever
Elite
team.
Four Pokemon.
the Elite
oh,
Four
the Pokemon
and
League.
the
Yeah,
league, whatever
whatever
they normally
team is
call
the
it.
bad
And
guy.
then there's the bat. Yeah.
And there's like the
Team
champion,
Star and Shield. Yeah.
who's like the reigning champion of that region. But like even like with the Pokemon Shield I'm playing, like you have your friend who's the brother of the current champion, and he's not doing very well. Like he loses a couple things. He's winning his gym battles, but he's like losing against this other kind of like jerk Pokemon trainer that I don't even like him. He's a real jerk. But like I win all of my matches because I'm just better, and I'm going to be the next champion. Of course, that's how it is. But like there's a lot of times where even like the gym leaders are like, it's not always about winning. It's about like connecting with your Pokemon.
Right.
It's about going on an adventure and like making friends. So he had like I forget I think his name's Hop or something like that. It's a really weird name, but like it's like, okay, like you're losing your battles against this pretentious jerk that just follows us around too. But like, you know, your brother lost before, like you don't have to be him. Your adventure is different. So it's not just teaching them some sort of equation or mathematical thing. This is like teaching them like how to be a person and not always look at it competitively. Like you're gonna have downfalls. You're gonna have great times too.
Yep. Very true. Although, also, to correct myself, it's not Team Star. That's Scarlet.
Yeah,
I forget who it is in Shield, Sword
In
and Shield.
Is it like
It's
Team
Team
Yell?
Yell.
Okay, Team
And they're
Yell.
pre-
I was
oh, they're
right.
Team
Yeah.
Yell.
Oh, because they run
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
and
Oh
yell.
yeah, they yell. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
like
the
they're like
team-
metal. They're like heavy
Yeah, with
metal
the
people.
rockers.
I'm not
We
gonna
get
buy
rockers.
that
Yeah.
game.
we get
Just
steadily
yelling.
like literally.
There's enough yelling in my house.
We get steadily like less and less create like we go from like Team Rocket, who's like this very like elaborate criminal underground like Yakuza-esque organization
That travels
to
via
like
hot air balloon.
yeah, that travels via. No, that's only Jesse James and Meowth. That's only them, and they don't really count. They don't have their act together. But then we kind of like devolve into like we have like I'm gonna take over the world with Pokemon by like awakening ancient Pokemon, and we believe
there's,
all
like-
Pokemon should be free. And then we just get to like Team Yell, and it's like we yell. So it's like you watch the story progression go down a little bit, but it always maintains. There's a lot of in Pokemon, a lot of adventure based games, there's a lot of really positive messaging about like the journey, and it's what you make it, and you know who's on your team, and you get to strategize, and you get to call those shots, and like you get rewarded for building good connection with your Pokemon, because like if they like you, they're more likely to perform, you know, evolve certain times. Like I think Crystal was the first one that implemented
Friendship-based.
friendship based,
Yeah.
that you cannot evolve Espeon or Umbreon unless you're really taking care of your Pokemon. So you have to like level it up and take it for haircuts. Oh my gosh, my
And
Espeon.
feed it Poffins. and,
Poffins,
like,
yes, yes. No, Poffins is only in Pokemon Go, isn't it? Are there Poffins in Crystal?
There are Poffins not in Crystal, but in the later games
In
where you
later
could like
games.
feed them and like
Yeah, and you can like pet
pet
them and
and
stuff,
like dress
right?
them
So
up. Yeah.
and so again, maybe this isn't teaching an anxiety management skill, but it's teaching not just those really positive messages about like, hey, yeah, there's going to be success, there's going to be failure, both are necessary, but you get to watch something you work on grow. I put time and care into this thing, even if it's a digital thing, right? Like I put the time and effort into raising this thing, and like I get to see the end results.
And I'll also say, Pokemon teaches you a lot of different things as well within like like a more traditional education standpoint. Because if you know that something is super effective, it's 2 times the damage. So if you have a 60 attack that does 60 damage, it's now doing times 2. Quick, simple math.
Oh, we want to
One
talk like
hundred
IVs and breeding. You
Oh,
want to really
yeah.
get into that for sure. Oh
Or
man.
like, there's also now in my classroom I've used Pokemon to help teach phonics. Where now it's tough with some Pokemon because they're like rooted in Japanese, like, but you can break down some Pokemon like names down to just simple phonics relationships and like splitting them up by syllables, and it's just like if you take interest in something, you can turn anything into a learning moment or educational.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and so again, that kid is going to be vastly more interested in, okay, let's break down Bulbasaur into 3 syllables than they are, here's a phonics lesson.
Yeah.
Right, so again, it's that meeting the child where they're at and what's interesting and valuable to them. It opens that door, that back door, for so much more.
And far more effective than sitting there and just saying no, or you've got 30
Yep.
minutes.
It's super
or
effective.
whatever comes next. So this brings us to our last call. And so the last call segment is designed explicitly to talk about a cultural phenomenon that we would prefer that it would go ahead and see itself out. A cultural phenomenon that either creates a problematic dynamic or that we see as having more harm than good in its continued presence and existence. So it doesn't have to go home, but it can't stay here. And the particular cultural phenomenon that we'd like to talk about today is the association between violence and video games. And sort of to take that one step further, this belief or stereotype that anybody who engages in any sort of gaming practices is isolated, lacks social skills, has no life outside of their games. And that ultimately takes them to this place of violence or mass violence. So, what do we think about the link between video games and violence?
There is none.
There is none.
That's, I mean,
The studies, time and time again,
Yeah.
right?
the studies have shown over and over that there is no link between violence and video games, and it's turned into almost like a dog whistle or
A
to
boogeyman of the.
a boogeyman to try and cover up issues that don't want to get talked about in the political sphere. And I just that's a personal gripe because you can't, like, I can look up at the sky and say the sky's green all I want, but there's no evidence that shows that the sky is green. But it's the same light, like there's no evidence. So
And it's been researched
Yes.
pretty heavily.
Yeah.
Well, and even the famous APA study from 2015 was like very rightly criticized because it didn't account for a whole slew of variables that it should have accounted for. And there's been plenty of research that shows that not only does it not cause people to be violent, it actually helps relieve stress in some instances and leads to a decrease in like behavior acting out and things like that in some instances. So, yep. dead horse.
It depends on the player. I've made this comparison. One of my areas of specialty is eating disorder work, and I've heard, I don't know, with the new Barbie coming out, like, oh, well, these dolls cause negative body image and they cause, girls to think they have to look like that. Okay, if you have a young child who is getting a lot of other negative messages about body image, or has a parent with negative body image, and so that child already doesn't feel good about themselves, and they pick up that doll, then yeah, they may think, oh, I'm supposed to look like this, but then there's other factors happening. The doll is not the issue. So if you have a child that is isolated, that has very maybe negative parenting happening, insecure attachment, is really struggling socially at school, is very isolated, and then they go pick up a video game that happens to have violent content, well, yeah, then they may relate to that game in a certain way, but it's not the game, it's the player, right? So when we look at these phenomenons, the content of the game, right, picking up Grand Theft Auto does not automatically make somebody violent, but if somebody is angry and not having a healthy way to express that, then yeah, there could be some real pros and cons to picking up that game. Why that game? Why not another game, right? Is that game a positive? Because then we have to even look at the nuance. Well, is that game a positive outlet that maybe that kid doesn't get to have anywhere else? Or is that game reinforcing something that isn't getting to be expressed, right? But the link that it causes, the causation, it's just not there, right? You have to look at the player and what factors are, affecting them.
Yeah, I've played tons of violent video games. I was the kid in like first grade, sawing people in half with Kung Lao as a fatality. So like I was playing Mortal Kombat very young. I watched the movies very young. I haven't done anything too horrible. I know that's not the whole thing. So
What more do you have to tell us?
no, but so
Well,
like
I brought up No More Heroes, for goodness sakes, which is a violent video game about violent video games. It dissects the, why is this something we play? The first game, at least. The other two, we could talk about, but the first one is why do we enjoy this? Let's just explore. Why do we like this in our games? And it has a really meta look on it. It's very cool. Sorry, I think I cut you off.
No,
so just say, nope, I've been there too.
and I always hated the studies because it might say there's a little bit of aggression, but that also happens with sporting events. Because I know one of the professors in the psych department in Kutztown that I went to had a poster about aggressive behavior from attending football or soccer. Philly has to pre-grease their poles, which don't help.
Would you like to come to a child's Little League game sometime? Because that
Yeah.
shit is crazy.
I was an ump.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. I've seen some things this year, and it's they are 7, y'all. Chill.
And some of I forget what the study was, but there was a study done that tried to break up violence into different things. There's cartoon violence, there's nonsensical violence, there's, being a gangster, selling drugs and killing other gang members like GTA. So one thing that they did to look at different variables was they try to look at this is violence that's just violent. This is your gangs, this is crime. But then you have other things Wolfenstein where you're you're fighting against the Nazis that took over the world. You're trying to stop horrible people. Or where I play Rainbow Six Siege or other Rainbow Six games where you're a counter-terrorist unit. You're trying to stop horrible things from happening.
Yeah.
They plant a bomb in a casino, you're trying to stop that. So it's more defensive violence.
Violence,
where,
but
Yeah.
not
it's
for
violence, but it's
sake.
not you're not just walking outside and stealing money and robbing a bank. You're doing something to stop something else.
So that almost puts. We could compare GTA versus Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein is very violent, but
Very
man, there
gory.
was so much backlash when they really took a hard political stance on the latest game, and I was like, this is great. Literally in the trailer, you have the guy with his giant machine gun being come and get it, Nazi pigs. That's not quite what he said. There was some colorful language thrown in there, but I was like, this is great. This is what Wolfenstein should be, right? But then there is escapism that I don't think is entirely all bad, and even something like GTA. I watched this. There used to be all these React channels on YouTube. There still are, but they gave GTA to a bunch of elderly people in a nursing home,
Oh, man.
just to see what they do with it. And these are lovely little old ladies and gentlemen that I don't think are experiencing any kind of active homicidal ideation or any kind of active threat to themselves or others that we as clinicians would assess. And they were like, oh, I'm driving around, oh, this is interesting. And then when they figured out how to access weapons, they were like, oh, come and get me, oh, this one's for mom. And they were acting out, throwing the grenades and throwing, and they were having fun. So again, it has to do with what person is accessing these games and why, not the game itself.
No, Christmas Day, my husband bought me an Oculus for Christmas. not last year, but the year before. And Christmas Day, we give it to my dad, and he's just messing around with it. What's he gonna do? He finds a machine gun immediately, and he's like, "I have a machine gun!" Like, and it's just like it's like you could have had a ping pong paddle, you could have thrown like a little paper airplane. You went with the machine gun. Okay,
And you didn't
interesting choice.
You didn't get it on video for
Oh,
us?
I actually have it on video.
Okay,
If you'd
thank
like it, I'll send it to you anytime. He was so delighted by his machine gun that he found versus anything else, and it's amazing. But I mean, I played GTA growing up over the years, and I've never like killed a prostitute or knocked over a liquor store, nor do I have a desire to.
No.
No.
Like, it's not like this long lost urge that I've just been thinking about since my late teens, early 20s,
Yeah,
and
no,
it was
and-
GTA 1 back then, but
GTA was a big like issue with the violence, but so was like some of the Call of Duties, like Modern Warfare
Oh,
2,
yeah.
no Russian. It got banned in a lot of countries because you act as a terrorist and you walk into an airport and you gun people down. Now you can skip it. It says this is a very violent. It matters for the story because it sets up the entire war that happens, but like it's very graphic. Like people are screaming and running away. You're killing like security guards. So, like very horrible. And then in I think Modern Warfare 1, the remaster one, like they have a spot where there's like children soldiers, like you're escaping a
Ugh.
homicide and you're a kid with a gun trying to escape like these people trying to kill your entire like thing. So it's very horrible things.
yeah.
But I mean, I kind of lost my train of thought there then.
But it doesn't evoke violence.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's horrible things, but these things happen.
It is fantasy. And we use fantasy sometimes as a tool to cope with the unimaginable, or go, what is that, and try to access it. Right? And I spoke about No More Heroes, and I could go off on a giant tangent about No More Heroes, and I know that we're seeing ourselves out with this topic, so I do want to be mindful. But the first game, the second and third games, they realized they had something really good on their hands, so they kind of kept going with it. But in the first game, you play this very stereotypical that stereotype of a video game player would be. You live in this crummy rundown apartment and you blew all your money on a beam katana and have no food and are doing odd jobs around the town and stumble your way into this League of Assassins. And each boss fight asks the question, like, why are you doing this? Like, why is this so meaningful to you? Why do you want to be the #1 top assassin? You really think that's such a good idea? Why? And it conflates a lot, too, about, like, the sexuality and gratification of violence, too. Like, you literally charge your beam katana by doing this. But it's like, why is that linked? Why do we pursue this in a fantasy realm? Why is this so gratifying, enjoyable, sexual for some people who then may not actually go out and do it in real life, right? But why do our video games feature things like gunning down child soldiers? And why do we seek that in our entertainment? And the guy who made the game actually was a funeral director, I believe, before he made the game and started the studio. So he kind of talks about, like, why is death something that we mourn and then also go play with? You know, and so like it's very interesting in the questions that it asks. And I think when you were bringing up these terrible things, one of the bosses even is like, hey, fantasy is okay. Like, everybody fantasizes and then like explodes and it's terrible, right? But it's this idea of like fantasy and violence, and why do we play with those concepts so much? There's like all these very like philosophical talks on No More Heroes, and it's fascinating because like you listen to one YouTube analysis of it and they're like, it means this, and another person over here is like, no, it means this. So but like it basically like it asks a lot of questions about you, the player, and like why are you enjoying the fantasy of being this basically like nobody in their rundown apartment with a beamed katana running around killing people? Why is that the fantasy you're picking? And not that it's a bad thing, but just ask yourself those questions. Be curious with yourself.
It's a video game Rorschach.
It's a violent video game, very violent video game. It did undergo some censorship, but it's a violent video game about, why do you play violent video games? You over there controlling Mr. Travis Touchdown. What? Just curious. Fantasy's not a bad thing, but why?
Why?
And building on this, there have been games that have been released that are like just they parody, or like they kind of like make light of situations that have actually like travesties that have happened in America or throughout the world, and they're just like they're not okay games. Like kind of like they're made for the purpose of being offensive. And if the gaming community was what these people are trying to make it out to be, people would seek out those games.
They'd be
But
successful.
exactly. But those games almost immediately after being released, normally by like a fringe group or like a fringe person like very far deep in like just like very on the outside of the community, it gets taken down and just blacklisted everywhere because there's a line whenever it comes to like this fantasy, and we all realize it, and I think I'm gonna say like 99.999% of the community realizes that too, that there's like a line that's drawn that you don't cross.
It's, I mean, what it sounds like to me is that video games are just one more scapegoat in a long line of different I mean, wasn't it Elvis once upon a time
I
that,
mean-
Well,
that
in
evoked
D&D,
violence?
His
And,
evil
Yeah.
hips moving around on the TV, you know.
well, man.
But I mean, Dungeons and Dragons had all these Christian
yeah.
groups
Oh,
up
yeah.
against it, and yeah, it's we need something to blame.
People, whenever the bicycle was created, people literally were like villainizing the bicycle. Same thing with the car.
Like
when
the bicycle?
Yeah,
Yeah.
electricity.
when the car
yeah.
was created, people were villainizing the
Uh-huh.
car. It's just constant. There's always something culturally that needs to be at the. Oh, it gives us a sense of control over a travesty or something that happens. It gives us an idea of like, oh, it happened because of this.
And we want to look for the why.
Exactly.
And it's never looking this way. It's always looking that way
Yeah.
for the why, which I think is always a really curious way in which we approach this. Well, thank you all for joining me here today, for unpacking video games in general, for setting the record straight in terms of video games and violence, and all the different ways that we can use gaming to promote wellness and to support us in our quest for joy. So thank you to our listeners at home. Again, I'm Dr. Kim Ernest, and this is the How to Be Happy Hour. Please join us in any of our upcoming pods, anything from helper stress and burnout, provider resiliency and vicarious resiliency, the impact of motherhood, and pets are all among our upcoming topics. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I brought some dice if anybody wants to play D&D.
Brought some dice.